Greetings and assalamu alaikum. It's a great pleasure to see so many new friends. Some I've known for quite some time, but this is the first time you're at the Sabeel Center, so it's very heartwarming. This is something we have been working on for a long time. But before I get into that, I'd like to introduce the Sabeel Center, what we do, what we're about. Sabeel Center is a subsidiary of IFANCA, the halal certification company. IFANCA has been around since early 1980s. I know how the company started. It was just a one page. It wasn't. There were no word processors back then, so it was cyclostyles, those of you who know what that is, of products that are halal for Muslim consumers in the US. It was a one-page document. That's how the company started. Today the company operates in just about all the continents. We have presence in over 7 audited plants for halal certification in over 70 countries. So for example, if Cargill or Cargills of the world, they'd like to sell meat that needs to be halal certified to Muslim countries such as the Gulf countries, they approach a company like IFANCA to halal certify their plants. Similarly, the Kraft cheese of the world, when they'd like to sell cheese or any of their other products to Muslim countries, they approach IFANCA to halal certify. So that's a business model. Sabeel Center is IFANCA's way of giving back to the community. A little bit about the history of this place. This used to be a synagogue and Sunday Jewish school. As the Jewish population moved further west, the place was left vacant for several years. IFANCA bought it about 7 years ago and started renovating the place. This place is actually the sanctuary of that synagogue. So this is sacred space, folks. What you see took us about 7 years to get to this level. What is Sabeel Center about? The place is dedicated to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Anything and everything we do directly relates to him. There are 4 objectives of Sabeel Center. First is a collection of artwork that we are working on. There are 18 topics that we have identified of different aspects of Prophet Muhammad's life that we are working on. 2 are already installed, other 2 have been done but haven't been installed yet. So stay tuned, you'll be hearing about it. The second objective is a series of lecture series about Islam, American Muslims, so on and so forth. We have had a few lectures, some of you have been there, so that is great. Speaking of lectures, our very first lecture, I need to point this out. I had 3 of my Jewish friends in the audience. They all had an affiliation with the former synagogue. And it was a sense of pride to them. They made a point of mentioning this, that a place that was left vacant is being utilized as a community center. We are not a house of worship, we are not a mosque, we are not a masjid, but we are an Islamic organization, and we don't wear it on our sleeves, but we know who we are. The third objective is halal cooking or halal kitchen. The place that you see in the back, that is a halal kitchen. There's nothing halal about it, it's just equipment, but this is where we plan to offer halal cooking classes from. There are 4 target audiences that we have identified that we will be little kids, we have you in mind, kid, middle schoolers and high schoolers, and I see some of you, adults and executive chefs. Lastly, but certainly not the least, a growing segment of our community are our seniors. To me, that's a precious generation. These are the people who raised us with all their failings, their shortcomings, and their strengths. If we as a community are able to look any further than they were, it's because we are standing on the shoulders of those giants. So we cannot ignore them. They carry a very prized history, our history. We haven't done anything about our seniors yet, but it's in the works. So those are the 4 objectives. Jacob Bender and out of Cordoba. It was about 12 years ago when I first met Jacob Bender. Professor Akbar Ahmed of American University was in Chicago area to keynote Everest Academy's annual dinner. Everest Academy used to be a full-time Islamic school in Northbrook, not far from here. He introduced me to Jacob Bender, and what a pleasure it has been to get to know this gentleman. Jacob at that time was starting out to make a documentary about 3 medieval philosophers, Rushd, the Muslim, Rabbi Maimonides, the Jew, and Thomas Aquinas, the Christian. His premise was, and has been, that those 3 medieval philosophers who were contemporaries to some extent, their work has great relevance for us. And this is in the aftermath of 9/11. And it pains me to say this, to point out that the relevance, the pertinence of those three philosophers' work is even greater today. So that is hurtful, but then at the same time, I'm eternally optimist. At the same time, it's gratifying that we have people like Jacob Bender who try to point out how we are not at war with each other. There's no clash of civilizations. We are talking about civilizations here. And he's going to talk about Andalusia, an era that spanned 700 plus years. If you think about it, there's 3 American civilizations. And it has a lot of model for us, role models for us in today's world. It was called la convivencia, coexistence. That's something that we need to harp on in today's world. Yes, the challenges are even greater than Jacob first started 12 years ago, but at the same time, the bridges are getting a little stronger. I firmly believe that. In spite of everything we hear in the media, we have a lot more friends in each other. In our religious communities, I'm not going to shy away from saying this, our religious communities provide a moral compass in tough times. So we are grateful for those of you who run religious organizations are here. It is great pleasure for Sabeel Center as an organization to host the first ever screening of Out of Cordoba in Chicago. It has been screened throughout the world, in other parts of the city, in other parts of the US, but I'm a hardcore Chicagoan, and it has been affront to me that it hadn't been shown in Chicago until now. And we are all to be blamed for it, but we are making amends. And I couldn't think of any better opportunity than today to talk about it. But before I bring Jacob to the stage, I'd like to thank a few people who have been very helpful in making this program a success. Mrs. Huma Ahmed, a banker in Chicago, and a Kashmiri sister of mine. She made Kashmiri chai, so the chai that you had, the so-called pink tea, that's Kashmiri chai. It's sort of a delicacy. In Kashmir, people drink it with salt. In other parts of the world, we drink it with sugar. And the joke is that Kashmiris are such sweet people that they don't need any sugar. Adil Beg and Zan Beg, they have been very instrumental in setting up the sound system as well as the screen behind us. Amjad Lodi and others helped with the serving of the food. Sayyid Saber was very helpful in so many other things too. The food is from Pita Inn. They didn't donate it or anything, but those who suggested this, I'm thankful for them because this food is very relevant to the program that we are talking about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jacob Bender, who's going to introduce the documentary. Then he's going to take a little break because he has seen it, a few thousand times? And, but he will be here, and at the end of the documentary, he will come back and we'll have Q&A. Thank you very much. Jacob Bender.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon in Chicago at the Sabeel Center, and I'm happy that my friend Rizwan was able to organize this. When I first met him, the film was nothing more than an idea, and it took another 10 years for the film to move out of my head actually and to become a real document. The film was done in the shadows of 9/11. My wife and daughter and I were living right out of Central Park in New York in September of 2001. And my daughter, who is sitting right back there, really sweet child, except when the sun went down and refused to sleep almost every night until she was 5. And so in the morning, my wife took her out for a walk in the stroller around Central Park, and as my wife up and heard a sound, and they saw a plane flying over the treetops, its wings going like this. And we all sat around the TV watching the towers fall, and the smoke from downtown had reached our house by the next day and became difficult even to breathe in the Upper West Side, a couple miles from Ground Zero. In the days and weeks after the attacks, many people began to talk about something they referred to as a clash of civilizations. And by this, they meant that there was this long, never-ending war and conflict between the Muslim world and the rest of humanity. And I had studied this relationship between Jews, Christians, and Muslims in Spain and throughout the Mediterranean during my college years, and I know that there was a different interpretation to the history of the relationship between our three communities. A interpretation of that history which stressed cooperation, not conflict, which stressed understanding rather than bigotry, that stressed harmony. And at that point, I decided to make a film about that period in history, which the Muslims call Al-Andalus, and the Spaniards call convivencia, religious understanding or cooperation between Jews, Christians, and Muslims in medieval Spain. I thought the film would take 2 to 3 years to make. I was aiming to finish the film by 2004, which was going to be Rambam's, Maimonides' 800th Yortzeit, the anniversary of his death. And I thought it would be, given the importance of these three figures, I thought it would be possible to raise the money to make the film that I wanted to do. I was correct about being able to raise the money. I was vastly underestimated the time it took, and so 11 years later, after I first met Rizwan, the film was finished, and I have been screening it around the world since 2010 when the film was finished, but eventually I was told I needed to get a real job, and we can talk about that after the screening. As Rizwan pointed out, I and my daughter have seen the film a couple gazillion times, so we will be in another room in this wonderful center, and we'll come back for the Q&A. So again, it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and if you could all close your cell phones, that would be helpful. So we need to take this off.
Jacob, thank you so much. We will take some questions from the audience, comments, but before that, we have a little gift for Jacob. We can't be thankful enough for everything that you have done, but here's a token of our small token of our appreciation. I'd like to read this first. Jacob Benter, Executive Director, CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, Philadelphia Chapter. In grateful appreciation of your dedication among the faiths, which is best exemplified by this documentary. Chicago premiere of Jacob Benter's documentary out of Cordoba at the Sabeel Center. Thank
you. So again, thank you very much all for being here, and it's a great pleasure to be with you here in the Sabeel Center. And again, this film took 11 years to make, and it's sometimes, but in the reactions of people around the world who have seen the film, that's one of the things that continues to give me hope. Anyway, questions or comments? I'd love to. Yes?
I'm sorry, Billy Jacob, thank you so much. It was a one, and I'm so glad Layla, my daughter, came and all of you came to see this. You put in your 11 plus years of your life
where will I be? Where would I want to be in 11 years? Breathing for one thing. In traveling around the world screening the films, and particularly in North America, I discovered that there were dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of small interfaith groups that have come together on their own volition to get to know who their neighbors were. Sabeel Center represents one of these groups, but in small little cities, Christians and Muslims and Jews and others have been meeting since 9/11, sharing holidays and sharing stories and trying to overcome the mistrust that happens when people take simplistic views of the other. And so in screening the film, it gives me a lot of hope for the future. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Again, thank you very much for such an extraordinary work. I must mention that the music was marvelous also, very suitable for each settings. The couple of questions. One is, what did it take so long, or why did it take so long, 11 years, to make this, what happened? And second question would be, in your judgment, where did we go wrong as far as the Muslim Christians and the way we had the situation right now among the Christians, especially Muslims and Jews? In your opinion, where did we go wrong?
As to the first question, why did it take so long to complete the film? Actually, it took a long time even to start making the film. Was primarily because of funding. The budget was $1 million, and that's not something I had about less than that, probably about less than 1% of that. Actually about $3.28, and I started doing fundraising and sending out letters to foundations and applying for grants, and it was going very slowly. I started really in 2002, and I set a deadline for myself, 3 years, to see whether I could actually complete the film. And that after 3 years of fundraising, you are not in a good position if your mother is still your primary supporter. This was not a good sign for the fundraiser. So at that point, my wife stepped in and said, okay, 3 months. And then the money started to come. So we got a large grant from the Spanish government, from the Spanish socialist government at that point, who was very much interested in reconnecting Spain to her Jewish and Muslim heritage. For a long time, Spain had attempted to overcome that and to pave it underground. And yet, after the socialist government came in, of Zapatero and Foreign Minister Moratinos, they made a commitment to promote the Spanish and the Muslim and Jewish heritage of the country, which helped in tourism, but also was a response to centuries of sort of the Catholic Church trying to erase that history. And then other grants started to come in as well. And eventually I applied to the Al-Walid bin Talal Foundation for $750,000. And this is a foundation run by a Saudi prince. And they, and then one day, about a year later, I got an email, and I never met His Royal Highness as I was told to address him. And then I received an email which said, His Royal Highness is happy to announce that he is giving you $250,000 for your film. I don't get telegrams like that or emails like that every day. But it was still only a third of what I had asked for. So I said I should, be happy about that. And so he announced it, and I announced it, because I thought it was a great thing that a Saudi producer, Saudi prince with $1 billion was going to give a Jewish filmmaker from New York money for a film about a Jewish and Muslim philosophers in that history. And then after it was publicized, a website called Jihadi Watch, run out of Philadelphia by a man by the name of Daniel Pipes, published a piece which said the only reason Mr. Bender was receiving this money because he's an agent of the Saudi secret police. So this was news to me, but I thought, they're accusing me of it, and so I thought of maybe going down to the Saudi embassy in Washington and saying, I've been accused of being on your payroll, and now is the time to actualize that. But I withheld that. So that's a short answer to some of your questions.
Okay, thank you. The second part, if you don't mind, what, in your opinion, where did we go wrong, the way situation is now, among the Muslims and the Jewish, the relations that we have?
Yeah, it's a very good question, but a really long and difficult question as well. I think that in some way, my rabbi in the beginning during the 9/11 section said that we are given a choice about which interpretation is jihad. We can find verses in all of our sacred texts that talk about revenge and annihilation. We can also find voices and verses of our texts that talk about compassion and mercy. And we are left perhaps with that choice, that existential and theological choice of how we interpret our religious texts and how we live by them. And looking at stories that we tell each other about who we are and what traditions we follow. It's sometimes difficult always to make a choice which is based solely upon mercy and gratitude and forgiveness. And those who go through trauma are sometimes so traumatized that they come out very embittered. My wife currently works for an organization named September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. And this is an organization of 300 families who found each other on the internet after the attacks, but also did not want to have the names of their loved ones utilized as justification for George Bush's war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they have been a voice for peace and reconciliation with the Muslim world since 9/11. But there are other groups of people who also lost loved ones on 9/11, who came out of that experience committed to revenge and to war. And it's very difficult to know how one will respond when faced with trauma, faced with the death of their loved ones. So I don't know the particular answer to your question. We can only keep searching for the meaning of our lives and based, hopefully, in my perspective, have it based on mercy and forgiveness, not on hatred and bigotry. Yes?
Before that, just a comment about Jihadi Watch. Those of you who don't know, it's a badge of honor for most Muslim activists. If you make it to Jihad Watch or Jihadi Watch, that means you are doing something serious. So I envy you, JP. As far as I know, I haven't made it yet.
Okay.
But it's been only 15 years, so give us some time. Bonnie Davidson.
So on a broader level, in relationship to the last question, where did we go wrong? Have we actually gone wrong? Have we actually gone wrong? Because I haven't experienced that in my life. I'm Jewish, and in any congregation services that I visited for any other event, I have not heard any kind of, I've only heard support for the Muslim community. I've heard nothing negative ever, and I've heard encouragement to be supportive. So I'm wondering if we've actually gone wrong.
Well, in many ways, I agree with you. The world is a violent place, but it's also filled with people who want to unite with each other and make the world a better place. In Hebrew, we say tikkun ha'olam, repairing the world from its broken parts. So thank you for your comment. Yes?
11 years is a long period.
Can you speak up?
Alhamdulillah, as I see it, it's a wonderful creation that you have put together. During this 11 years period, did you ever think of giving up this project and walk away from there? Or do you think now that you have finished this, you have achieved something and the object that you are trying to achieve is being achieved?
Well, making the film was really a long labor of love and sweat, and a lot of fundraising letters. And immediately after finishing the film, I set out on another journey of 2 years to screen the film around the world. So when it was finished, I basically took it to England and Germany and France and Spain and Italy, and then in Morocco and Egypt and Doha and Turkey and Greece and around the US. But it got very tiring, and I wanted something more permanent. And so I started looking for what my wife refers to as a real job. And I saw the announcement for a position of director in Philadelphia for the Council on American Islamic Relations CARE. And I thought, this would be in a way a continuation of my work on the film, just in an office. And so I applied, and alhamdulillah, they hired me. And after commuting to the job for another 2 years, we eventually moved, all 3 of us, to Philadelphia, where we live now. So the film led directly to a continuation of my work with Muslims and Jews and Christians in the city of Philadelphia. And so it seems like a wonderful coda, a wonderful conclusion, or a wonderful next step after finishing the film. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so in 9/11, a couple thousand people got killed, and in other countries, people are getting killed more. Why don't people notice that?
That's a wonderful question. Blessed are the children, for they shall be.
There's millions of people getting killed in other countries,
Yes.
and why don't people notice that?
Part of it is with because of how people learn about the world and about situations around places which they know very little about. So while Americans lost 3,000 loved ones on 9/11, 2 decades ago or so, in a country called Rwanda, 800,000 people were killed in the space of 2 or 3 months. But it's a long way away, and people relate first and foremost, I think, to the deaths and the people closest to them. Second of all, perhaps in a very narrow and prejudicial way, people feel worse when somebody like them or resembles them have bad things happen to them. So, and also America is a big, big country, and between the Pacific and the Atlantic, people sometimes lose sight of the rest of the world. But I think when you become president, you will make sure that that is not going to happen.
Actually, that's for sure.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Naki, Mr. Naki,
Well, first of all, beautiful documentary.
Thank you.
Going back to the 11th, 12th century, the period of Averroes and the period of Al-Ghazali, they were confrontational. And in the Muslim world today, I think it is Al-Ghazali who has prevailed, not Ibn Rushd. And I would like you to comment, if you have that background, to this development, because the extremism and the orthodoxy which is prevailing today in the Muslim world is definitely antithetical to what Averroes preached and said. Of course, they were rivals.
Right. If I could repeat the question or rephrase it, you want to know the sort of position about what extremism today, when it manifests itself, is sort of in direct opposition to what Ibn Rushd was talking about.
And of course, I would like you to comment on Al-Ghazali, because he had a different conflicting point of view than Ibn Rushd.
So Al-Ghazali was a philosopher who came in the generation before Ibn Rushd.
That's correct.
And wrote a book called The Incoherence.
Yeah, that was Ghazali. And
Right.
Ibn Rushd wrote a book, Incoherence of Incoherence.
So Ibn Rushd of Averroes answered that and named his book The Incoherence of the Incoherence. So it was a sort of very clever critique of Al-Ghazali. I'm certainly not an expert on Islamic philosophy, though I learned a lot doing the film. From what I was able to learn and from the people and the teachers that I've had since then, I think one answer that they have provided me is that the extremism that we find manifest today is not only in opposition to Ibn Rushd, to Averroes, Muslim philosopher in the film, but is in opposition to the Quran itself, which makes it quite clear that murder is haram, and that when Muslims kill other Muslims, or when Muslims kill non-Muslims, they are acting in a way which is a sin, which is a violation of the deepest beliefs of the faith of Islam, which together with Judaism has a phrase that says, when you destroy a single life, it is as if you are destroying an entire universe. And if you save one life, it is as if you are saving an entire universe. Now, there are many Muslims and many Jews and many Christians who don't understand that as the bedrock of their tradition. We're coming in 3 days now to remember and to mourn the tragic assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a Christian. The Ku Klux Klan are also Christians. The Christians also ran the slave trade and engaged in colonialism around the world. So all of us, again, can choose which part of Judaism, which part of Islam, which part of Christianity we wish to follow. Some of my compatriots follow one way, which again goes back to revenge. Other people embark upon a path which involves forgiveness and reconciliation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay. Shoaib, and one last question. Shoaib, Basi, go ahead. No, I don't.
Okay.
I was just going to question about the distribution for this film. I mean, it seems that the audiences that you are presenting to, kind of, I think, understand this message, but a lot of people who need to see this are people in the Muslim countries and other places. So, what are you doing regarding distributing the movie as well as like, translations in other languages?
Right, and so am I, or is the film preaching to the choir, as they would say?
Basically.
The answer is yes. To many, it's a self-selecting audience. I haven't yet been invited onto Fox, nor do I expect to be. And though I have taken the movie into places which have been, less than sympathetic to one or more parts of the film, and we talk about it afterwards. So there were Christians who felt that that Thomas Aquinas was not treated fairly in the film, and that I spoke more than once about the violence committed during the Crusades by Christianity. There were some Muslims who said that this or that part of the film, that Averroes was a minor character who shouldn't be that elevated. But in terms of distribution, the film, this is about my 180th screening in person since 8 years ago. And the film made it onto television in Spain and Italy and Greece and Egypt. And that most interestingly, in 2013, Al Jazeera, a documentary channel, bought the film, made an Arabic version of it, and showed it around the Arab world. So literally, potential audience of millions of people, though I don't think Al Jazeera documentary channel checks in with the Nielsen ratings of late. So, but the film never made it onto TV here. PBS turned it down for reasons that are still obscure. So I'm not sure. But I continue to screen it at places like this and to meet audiences who are very kind and generous about the film, and that to me makes it worth it, because I get also to meet people in different communities who have struggled with the same issues in the conflict between reason and revelation, as Maimonides and Averroes did. So. One more. There, Chuck.
Yeah.
Hi, one more question. How you doing? Mubashir here. There you go. How are you? Hi.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there. Yes.
Hi, my name is Mubashir from, we represent Muhabbat Mission International. It's a humanity organization. And watching your movie and listening to your great talks, and we'd like to ask you, is your movie representing humanity leading towards divinity? One thing I really liked about what you said is you follow your rabbi and he's your teacher. So those points are very important in the Muslim world, in the Christian world, in the Jewish world, where one needs a guide, a teacher that directs you in the way of humanity leading towards divinity. Because at the end of the day, everybody believes in one God, one creator. So my question to you is, with your film, will one be awakened towards spirituality of the message? The core of the message being that we are a spirit and going towards divinity and moving towards shifting the consciousness towards love, the attention and guidance towards love.
Inshallah, which means, God willing, your words find receptivity. I think that's a wonderful last question. I can only, take pride in your words and are deeply am touched by them and thankful that you would come on a Sunday afternoon to share the viewing experience with people here. I do have some DVDs to sell, so if you're wanting to purchase some of the film, so you can watch it with your grandchildren one day, please come up. For those who didn't get a chance to ask a question, I'm sticking around, so come on up. And again, it's great. Thanks to Sabeel Center, to Rizwan.
Couple of things. I owe an apology to some of our Jewish friends. Obviously, we have a lot to learn about dietary restrictions. I have a lot to learn. So I apologize to those of you who could not eat either because you're fasting or the food is not suitable enough. So my apologies. We'll make up for it somehow. Let's lighten things up. There's a joke that I can talk about now. Since we have talked about coexistence and everything for the past couple of hours, and we have learned with from each other and from the documentary. So there's a religious war that I started a little while ago. Jacob and I have been talking about scheduling this documentary for a long time, as I mentioned earlier. We finally settled on March 31st. Then one of our friends, he's a community liaison consultant to Ivanka, Richard Reeder. Unfortunately, he's not here. He would have killed me. He called me and said, this is the second night of Passover. You can't have a Jewish speaker talk about, among other people, Rabbi Maimonides on the second night of Passover. So we decided to schedule it on Sunday afternoon. And once I sent out the email, within a minute, I mean, you can have written a script for this. Within a minute, I got an email from a Buddhist friend, a Jewish friend, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Baha'i. And I thought they'd be so proud that we recognized Passover, we acknowledged it, we admitted our mistake, and we fixed it. But they all said, man, what are you doing? It's Easter Sunday. So I can offend only one faith community at a time. I called all of my Christian friends, told them that we'll get together with them and schedule something on every Hanukkah night. And we'll serve delicious Jewish food just to even things out. Thanks again.
No Jew would allow a Muslim to have the last joke. So I was speaking at was one of the keynote speakers in the Pittsburgh the Pittsburgh chapter of CARE in my fellow Pennsylvanians, and the MC of the night introduced me as the only Jewish executive director of CARE. And so when I got up, I said, it was hardly any surprise that I was the only Jew here, since after eating the samosa in the reception area, I was the only one sweating profusely from the food. So, see, I come from a tradition where cottage cheese is considered spicy. So, what else can I say? Jews and Muslims actually don't have that much in common. For instance, I know that you don't drink. My father had a after-dinner drink every night, which was Maalox, but that's enough.
This is the kind of religious war we want, don't we? Thanks again for coming. We'll hang around for a little bit. Have a good evening.